Hello and welcome to the Choice and Chance tabletop role-playing game channel. My name is Chuck. This is a channel talking about all different kinds of tabletop role-playing games, D&D, Pathfinder, their clones, adjacent systems, and all of the game-related content that I'm going to be posting will be largely system agnostic, meaning you can drag and drop it into your game with very little change. Content creation plans are battle maps, sort of dungeons and locations, small encounters you can sprinkle in your game, and then more discussion-oriented concept videos in the hopes of starting discussions and improving my toolbox as a game master, and hopefully helping people to learn from my mistakes and just sort of engage with people who have a similar perspective on the hobby or a very different perspective on the hobby. And this video is about my biases, the lens in which I view the game, the way that I approach the game, so you can be an informed viewer, and if you're redirected to this video at any point in the future, you can sort of understand why I might have sounded very strangely opinionated. So yeah, it's basically opinion-based. So in terms of systems, or how I started playing, I've been running games for about 8 years, sort of the iceberg meme. I started with 5e because of its ubiquity. It's just how it is. Like, the YouTube algorithm agrees, the general marketing community agrees that when you get introduced to the hobby, it's generally through 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, at least in the past 10 years. And I played that for a few years, sort of moved to, you get up, you rub your eyes after a little while, and you're like, wait, maybe there's some other stuff out there. I actually just went to 3.5 edition of D&D because at the time I was very enthralled by the idea of crunch and mechanical, sort of like mechanical depth in a system. And I thought that players' mechanical options made the game more meaningful. I had players that really liked making strong characters. So I went that route for a while. I sort of eventually grew disillusioned with that. Strong opinion here. I think that min-maxi, numbers first, tactical war game style gameplay is really not the strength of tabletop role-playing games. And some people, I'm sure, really hard disagree with that. To me, it feels like, video games, board games, dedicated war games where, the entire system is revolved around resolution of a combat scenario are just more efficient tools for that, sort of power fantasy, for that sort of game. So I still have players that are extremely interested in having strong characters and getting the most out of the system mechanically, but sort of move towards a simpler system. I played a few old school systems, and I ended up sort of Frankensteining my own. I could say that it's probably very similar in most mechanical senses to any of the mainstay old school retro clones, although I do have slightly more durable player characters, especially at lower levels, and I do not use THAC0. It's sort of simplified mechanics, but I can get more into the system that I use if people are interested, but for the sake of this video, I think that that's all that needs to be said. I am a player-driven narrative game master, meaning that I do not design a set story that I encourage or expect my players to interact with. Rather, I populate a world, the players make their decisions. I follow their lead, and a story emerges from the repercussions of their actions and their wills and wants in the game. Man, does it make prep so much easier when you play this way, guys. Got to tell you, it's great. In terms of encounter balance, I've already kind of talked about crunch and how I did used to be a experience spreadsheet. This encounter is going to take this number of rounds and should incur this amount of resource loss. Like, I was very numbers focused, and I have moved towards pursuing the big V, or verisimilitude, if you will. Verisimilitude, kind of a buzzword in the old school community for a while now, but it's sort of creeping into all the areas of the hobby, because you just sound so smart when you say it. You say verisimilitude, it's just it's just such authoritative speech to use a word like that. The verisimilitude just means the appearance of being true or real. Now, this can apply to all the areas of the game. Basically, verisimilitude just encourages the ability for a player or a game master to suspend their disbelief. Obviously one of the most critical parts of truly engaging with tabletop role-playing games is suspending your disbelief. But verisimilitude, when related to encounters, simply means that the power level of monsters and NPCs in the world is as it should be, meaning that it is in no way related to the power level of the party, and the party can find themselves absolutely crushing their opposition or being utterly outmatched, with combat being an absolute, we will lose. And these style of encounters, I have to tell you, they're insanely memorable. Now, a lot of people talk about how verisimilitude in encounter design means that combat is not always the preferred option. And that's very true. And when characters overcome very large odds, incredible odds through clever ideas and execution of a scheme, it's super thrilling. But something that people don't talk enough about is when your mid-level party happens upon a pretty large amount of weaker creatures or something, and for some reason those weaker creatures are like really looking for a fight. Man, like the party, this is a side of verisimilitude people don't talk about, is when some strong player characters just like clean house. Like it's pretty fun. It's not like, again, I'm not like a heroic fantasy enjoyer necessarily all the time, but it feels very earned when your players have been scurrying around and avoiding stronger opponents, and finally some snot-nosed punks challenge the players in a random encounter or something, and they get to take out all their frustration with that, and just on the just have a grand old time. It's another side of verisimilitude I feel like doesn't get talked enough about. I'll probably have to make a whole video on or numerous videos on encounter designs, because I want to make videos about individual encounters to go over all the different scenarios that can emerge from them. And then next, I guess I want to talk about fudging the dice. Now, this is one where I feel like I have to be careful, because I don't want to come off as a crazy person, but I think that there are three entities necessary for the experience of tabletop role-playing games, for the experimenter, however you want to call it, the game master, the players, and the dice. And I think that fudging the dice is a similar level of violation to interrupting a player in the middle of them making a decision, overriding their decision, and then ignoring them trying to argue with you or talk to you about it. I think that fudging the dice damages or outright destroys the nature of the experience on a similar level as completely stripping player autonomy. I won't go off. I won't go crazy about it, but that's how I feel. Strong opinion, I know, but the key part of making the game meaningful to me is that both the players and the GM are beholden to the results of the dice, and that they would not alter you would not alter them, and you would respect the dice as a third entity at the table. And lastly, I want to talk about how dangerous of a game I run, because obviously I have a Frankenstein weird homebrew system. I talk about a lot of this video is largely about tenets of old school play, and with some caveats and my general opinions and perspective on things. But I think a huge part of the dogma online and on D&D YouTube is considering the rate of player character demise. And of course, you have new school, 5th edition heroic fantasy D&D, where the margin for error is very high. The narrative comes first. Players have an enormous amount of tools that are innate, not acquired through exploring or engaging with the world, but simply innate and granted through progress. And that's a very very sort of, I guess it's a very strong opinionated section of the hobby that that's the 5th edition by the book is the way to play the game, and that means player characters are rarely dying, really. After level 3, I suppose. Before level 3 in 5th edition, player characters can still bite it. And then you have the grognards, who are they come out, like, back in my day, I'd bring a stack of sheets to the game because I knew that I was going to get splattered on the wall left and right. And my game master made 10-foot poles cost 150 gold. And we got punished for even sneezing in the dungeon. We had this rule that if you sneezed at our table, you lost 2 hit points. And it's that kind of super masochistic, boom, gotcha, instant death trap, old school stuff, which again, like, is not, there are, plenty of old school games where that doesn't happen. But I want 90% of the time when a player character dies, that to be a result of a risk that player knowingly took, and the dice didn't go their way, or the situation didn't pan out the way that they expected, and they lost their character. The other 10% of the time, there's room for the dice to just claim a character. The dice occasionally just reach out and take your character away, and that does happen. And then the player could potentially make a mistake that would result in their character's demise. But I believe that if a player loses their character and we're not considering that as a possibility in the situation, that I have failed as a game master, and that I have, basically my role at the table, I have fundamentally failed, because I need to be conveying information in such a way that players can make informed decisions and that they understand risk in situations. Now, obviously, this has its limits and it is contextual, but that is what I believe. And I don't like cheap shots. Not that kind of DM. I don't do the cheap shot player character punishment stuff. It's just not the game that I enjoy. Now, I do, again, I should probably preface this by saying that player characters do bite the dust relatively often, compared probably to modern D&D. And then, of course, probably quite infrequently compared to old school D&D. I'd say probably once every 4 or 5 sessions, a player character is biting it. Maybe even less than that. But, that's just the nature of the game that I run. Summing up some of my opinions and my biases. I've rambled for a while. Somehow I'm way longer than I thought I would be. But I really appreciate people who've watched this long. If you guys have anything you want to throw at me in the comments, start a discussion, or, tell me that I'm wrong and I suck and I don't know what I'm talking about, I'd love to hear that as well. And thanks for watching, and, good luck in your games, and more content coming soon.